Apparently it was a popular decision.
And you shall feel the pythons, brother.
Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John never wants to follow. Get ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
You know, John, that intro is much classier than our show, don't you think?
I wouldn't say it's classier.
It's
than
to
our
the
show.
point where
I would say it's inspirational.
Hold on a minute. I got to hit.
I mean, I think that's the only word to describe
John,
it.
I got a little
patriotic.
Problem.
We're only a month away from Independence Day. We're just coming off Memorial Day. I think it's inspirational.
Inspirational. You didn't come on then for a minute because I have a sticky button. Don't you hate when you have a sticky button? And I had unstick your button. So what did you say again? You said about what was the whole thing you said?
Well, just that, I mean, we're coming up on July 4th. We'll be here before you know it. We just marked Memorial Day. I hate when people say Happy Memorial Day. I had to teach my kids there's no such thing as Happy Memorial Day.
Right.
So, you don't have to be a jerk and correct people about it. But, we're coming off this patriotic holidays, Brad. And I think the song is just uplifting and inspirational. You did a great job with it.
My complaint right now is that people will say it's summer when it's not. It's still spring. People say
100% agree with. I feel the same about winter as we near December 21st. I feel the same way.
Right. People talk about, it's winter. Like on the December 15th, they go, it's winter. No, it's not. It's fall. Now, there's something, if you really want to get in the weeds, remember I went to school at Mississippi State to work on my meteorology degree, which I never finished. But there is technically what they call meteorological seasons and not the official calendar seasons. And if you look at that, and that depends upon what part of the country you're in, because some parts of the country move into summer quicker than other parts, if that makes any sense. But anyway, that's sort of in the weeds. That is John Combest, Combest. He is renowned around the state for putting together a daily list, one that he does not miss. He's done this every single day for over 22 years. He's not like a teacher who takes the summer off, and this teachers are out of school right now. Most of them are. He's not a teacher like who takes the summer off. He's not a guy that listens to a talk show with a guest who figures out that if you take certain days off, you're going to end up with 9 days of vacation time. No, he's not that guy. He's got his nose to the grindstone. Matter of fact, he's been doing this for so long with his nose to the grindstone, he doesn't have a nose anymore.
Don't even have a nose.
It's gone. Right. He's sort of flat-faced. He's the guy that every morning we come to, and we bring in this guy by the name of
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he starts it off with...
Now on with the countdown.
And we start with...
In third place...
A powerful quote. We went from feeling good to horrible to, I guess, good now. That quote is from Dawn Chapman of Just Moms STL. Brad, this is a topic we touch on frequently. We talked about it yesterday. We've talked about it a lot because of the legislation in Congress for radioactive victims, folks looking for compensation here. And a big development yesterday. U.S. Representative Ann Wagner, in part of her meetings with leadership, Speaker Mike Johnson, convinced Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, to pull legislation off the floor that would have ignored the Coldwater Creek, Weldon Spring, other contamination victims. In other words, Ann Wagner convinced Mike Johnson to pull this bad legislation off the floor. It's unclear right now, Brad, whether or not the Speaker's office, or I should say whether or not the Speaker will offer new legislation that includes Missouri funding in the next round before the original RECA expires. But this is good news, and universally now, I have a piece up today from the Missouri Independent that credits Ann Wagner for this at least temporary reprieve for victims. Did you see this yesterday, Brad?
I did. Matter of fact, a couple of people sent it to me because apparently they have heard you and I have talked about it before. And once again, you and I, both North County guys, you talked about friends that you had that lived very close to our, right up on, their house abutted Coldwater Creek.
On Arrow Point.
Right. We talked about people who used to swim in Coldwater Creek. I know several people like that. And once again, 80 plus years, this has been really causing problems. And I guess what frustrates me is when you hear all the money that's being allocated for all these goofy, stupid studies, like, the horn-spotted owl, where does he poop in the winter, and stuff like that. And then, what was it the other day? I read some story about the fact that we won't defend our own border, but we're sending hundreds of millions of dollars to other countries so they can beef up their borders, and yet they won't spend any money to get this thing taken care of. I think it's great. But once again, it may not turn into anything. It's just sort of Ann Wagner made her point and essentially got it, I guess, essentially reconsidered. Isn't that what this essentially comes down to?
I think that's the key to Don Chapman's quote there is, she said we went from feeling good about it to horrible to a little bit better now. So it's a roller coaster for these folks. And remember, folks like Don Chapman have been fighting for many years for this. So this is at a point that should be the climax of their legislative achievement. They're being delayed there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And once again, it's something that's gone on forever and ever. Matter of fact, I have to tell you an interesting story. I was in North County yesterday, and I have some musings about that. So maybe we'll talk about that next segment.
Yeah. And when it comes to people getting what they deserve, Brad, that's a pretty good lead into number 2.
Oh, and you know what? I bet you Casey had something to say about that.
Up a notch to number 2.
See, I told you.
The St. Louis Reparations Commission, Brad, they're working on a draft of what's called the Final Harm Report. Now, this is critical to the whole shebang. I should point out that this piece to us, I'm sure you couldn't guess this, Brad, but comes from St. Louis Public Radio. They have a content creator called Andrea Henderson, and her beat is, quote, race, identity, and culture. And she does a really good job in here talking about some of the personalities that are compiling this harm report. And there are a lot of professors, there's some folks from WashU, from SLU. Now, you'll recall, Brad, that the biggest accomplishment so far of the Reparations Commission was that they got Tashara Jones to extend their deadline. I know it's a shocker that a Reparations Commission wouldn't meet a deadline. And the other shocking piece about it was that, if you'll recall, they asked for more money. So not only do they miss deadlines, but they need more money. And that need for more money was reiterated in this Andrea Henderson piece too. They really need more money for marketing and promotion, social media, and production of the harm report. It'd be helpful if we could get some money for some consultants, to maybe help us write this thing. There's not enough there. Interestingly, Brad, across the state, Tony Bateo at Tony's Kansas City also has a link today to a Kansas City Star piece. Kansas City is dealing with the same Reparations Commission thing, and I believe that Kansas City has already set aside either $500,000, like in real money. Like right now for the city, they're just kind of talking about what's going on. But Kansas City has set aside either $500,000 or $250,000 already. Oh, excuse me, $510,000 for slavery reparations in the next year's budget. So I'm not sure how Mayor Quentin Lucas and the council will divvy up $500,000 if it's by, who does the best artwork, who does the best freestyle, who had the most slave ancestors. I don't know. So, Brad, finally a little bit of progress. Now, I think that you and I, as we get closer to the September deadline, should make a wager on whether the commission will actually meet its deadline. Because, in these type of things, I'll probably take the over. You get what I'm saying, Brad?
Don't get me going about this whole thing. We've got a situation in the city of St. Louis. Matter of fact, I didn't talk about this yesterday. I referred to this, but I never got around to it. Population. We'll talk about that in maybe next segment or segment after. The city has so many problems to deal with. This should be like number 32 on the list, but that's my opinion. I mean,
you're not an African American like me.
Well, that's right. You're
not in line for cash the way I am, Brad. So
you're one.
You know what Mandela or somebody said: where you stand depends on where you sit, and I sit with the African Americans who are in line for our reparations payout. Right?
So what's your 1%? What are you 1%?
I'm Senegalese.
Senegalese. Okay.
Could I pick it out on a map? You don't need to know that, but I do know that I'm 1% Senegalese. Don't ask me to point it out on a map of Africa, Brad.
One of the highlights for me of the Trump presidency was when he goaded, as he referred to her, Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren into getting the test. And if you know the crazy story, she went to college. She got admitted to elite schools, and she got she taught at Harvard, didn't she? Wasn't she like a Harvard professor
one
or
of
something
those
like that?
schools.
And because of the fact that she was American Indian, she was a Native American. And then when she takes the test, I still can't believe she did it. I mean, it turns out that Donald Trump probably has more Native American ancestry than Elizabeth Warren did. And it was just, to me, it was like, oh, okay, that didn't work out too well for her. And you know what? It's sort of interesting because if you drew this would be something that John would draw with as far as charting, publicity and press coverage and things like that. I would say that when that came out, that she not disappeared altogether, but her presence in the press diminished quite a bit. Would you maybe go along with me on that one?
I think that's fair, yeah. And there could have been other factors because she stopped being talked about as a presidential candidate or other things. But your point, Brad, is well taken. I think she maybe she felt that, I don't know. It's hard for me to defend. It's hard for me to defend her, Brad.
Well, I guess the thing that I won't go. We'll move on. I won't say anything more.
The number one.
Newton Jones and me getting Ukrainian wives. Who is Newton Jones, you ask, Brad? Well, I'll tell you. He's the former president of the Boilermakers, the International Boilermakers Union. Brad, did you know that the International Boilermakers Union is headquartered in Kansas City?
Right. Is it really?
Yeah, I would have never expected that. Now, this gentleman, Newton Jones, lived actually in North Carolina, and his consigliere, Brad, his number one guy, a guy named Tyler Brown, he's doing a little singing to the feds, if you know what I'm saying. Wired for sound, doing a little snitching to the feds. And his outline, the prosecutors who are this gentleman, Tyler Brown, I should get to the heart of the story. This gentleman, Tyler Brown, pled guilty pled guilty last week to one count of racketeering conspiracy. So he got a lesser charge in return, it seems, for singing about the Kansas City Union boss. Now, the interesting story about this, and what seems to be most offensive to the Kansas City content creator, a woman named Judy Thomas, is not only did the president of the union spend union money at high-end restaurants, expensive wine and tours, trips to Ukraine, but the best part, Brad, in the Ukraine, he hooked up with a 19-year-old and made her his wife. Yes, the story starts other European countries with a wife 4 decades his junior. So I have it up today, Brad. It's from the Kansas City Star. And first of all, I have to admit my ignorance. I had no idea that the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers, I thought maybe they were all at Purdue with the Purdue Boilermakers, But this union guy snitched on this other union guy. And the joys of what the union boss enjoyed, a lot of monies. He funneled, quote, large sums of money to his Ukrainian wife for work she never performed. But if she's 19, Brad, don't you know the real job she's supposed to perform?
I'm not going to touch that.
Just housework.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Making a sandwich here and there. It's rare that we have, yesterday we had a pretty cool story about the UAW and one of their capos, Badmouth and Josh Hawley. That we had the Teamsters giving money to Hawley. So this is kind of a feel-good story about unions. Why shouldn't the union boss be able to spend, I don't know, maybe north of $1 million on some gifts? Doesn't he earn it by working his way up through the union system, Brad?
I'm not going to say that because of the fact that I don't have a remote car starter on my car. So,
Hey, I'm Tony Trupiano. I'm going to drive down 55, and nobody's going to mess it with me.
I'm not going to say anything about that.
Where's Tony Rapano?
I'm not going to say anything about that. Okay, so those are the top 3.
They are.
Okay, I'm trying to find something here, but I can't find it. Okay,
I can tell.
Let's talk about the Trump thing for a minute. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on the radio. I'm not a legal scholar. I do find the law fascinating, and quite honestly, I probably know more about the legal system than your average bear. And don't ask me why that is, but that's a case. In a criminal case, you have to have essentially a complete. Everybody in the jury has to essentially say guilty or not guilty. You can't have a split decision. Okay. In a civil case, it's different, but this is criminal. He's being charged criminally. In other words, if he is found guilty on these charges, they could literally put the cuffs on him, walk him down the hall, and put him into a holding cell, and then go through what they call it, prisoner indoctrination or whatever.
Intake, yeah.
Intake. There you go, intake, and he could be in a cell. Okay, so what's interesting about this is that the jury instructions are very important from the judge. After the trial essentially has come to its conclusion where both sides give their closing arguments, the judge gives the instructions to the jury. And what's interesting about this is, and once again, this is not me saying this is the legal experts. He essentially referred to what he called the 4, 4, and 4. Do you know what I'm talking about with this?
No, explain it to me.
Okay, the 4, 4, and 4, he's being charged with 34, I believe, 34 different crimes, 34 different felonies, okay? If four of the jurors pick one crime, and another 4 pick another crime, and another 4 pick a third crime, 4 plus 4 plus 4 equals 12, he's guilty. I'm going, what?
I did see this yesterday, Brad. You're right. Now, isn't that unprecedented?
Well,
or isn't that at least out of the ordinary?
I listened to several legal experts yesterday, and every one of them, even the CNN types, were going like, "Oh, we've never seen this before." It's almost it's almost like, what in the world? And the crazy part of this is, it's to the point where even Trump said this is so tilted that Mother Teresa would be convicted. And I think he's going to get nailed. I think there's going to be this 4-4-4. It almost sounds like lunch at Wendy's, 4 for 4. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it sounds like some kind of a fast food deal.
Right.
Yeah, or at least a Chinese menu. Pick 4 from column A and 4 from column B.
Come into McDonald's and get the 4-4-4 meal. Get 4 nuggets, 4 French fries, 4 giant Diet Cokes. But see, I'm going like, this is so bizarre.
So they're determined to get them. So
yes.
The rules are going to change based on however they think they can get them.
Right. And a couple of the experts I listened to yesterday talked about the fact that Trump's defense team is being called out because they didn't object enough. And the one attorney says, sometimes you're in front of a judge and things are going really the wrong direction. And there are things that you can object to. But if you object too much, then the judge will essentially just shut you down. And essentially, the idea being is that and this was sort of the complaint, that the defense team was not, objecting enough, that they should have, objection, Your Honor, that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's just sort of weird. And then the thing came back that they wanted to see more of. Now, the part of this that, hold on a minute, what I don't necessarily understand, and maybe a legal expert can explain this to me, they say that the jury instructions, even though they are written out by the judge has them in his written form, he gives them verbally to the jury, but the jury cannot have a hard copy of the jury instructions. Now, why would that be? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I wonder why.
If that's true, why would that make any sense? If that's part of ultimately how you're going to determine if someone is guilty or not guilty, wouldn't you want, as a juror, to be able to look at those instructions and say, okay, on line 32, he says that we have to do this, and on line 56, he says we have to do this, and you know what I mean? It's to the point where, but yet yesterday the jury asked for 2 more things. They wanted to watch something or listen to something again. And the other thing is, why aren't these people being sequestered? This is probably...
Yeah, that's shocking to me.
This is like they talk about the trial of the century. Okay, I think most people would agree the trial of last century was the OJ trial. I mean,
at which you attended.
Right, one day.
Which you attended firsthand in person.
Wouldn't you agree that that was like the trial of the century? I mean...
Oh, of course it was. Yeah. I mean, I have VHS tapes of it still, Brad, in my basement.
30 years later, people still talk about that. People who weren't even born. I have heard people who are under the age of 30 refer to the OJ trial and think to myself, you weren't even born yet. But it's become this cultural icon of some people would say of the ultimate backlash against the white legal system, that even though everybody knows OJ was guilty, they didn't want to convict him because of the fact that they just got tired of having black men being convicted. Yeah. He's black. He's on trial and he's guilty. It's just bizarre. This whole thing is just, if my journalism professor, Camille Winter, was alive today, man, we could talk to him every day on the air, and every day would be a field day because he would just go over this, the way it's being covered, the way the journalists are covering the story, good, bad, ugly, indifferent, the whole bit. It's just so weird. Okay.
Yeah, and the good thing is I bet in the next 24 hours we'll see, for example, a Will Scharf on either Andy Fry's show or one of these national shows talking about some of the particulars of this. So as always, I'll keep an eye out for it.
Do you know why Will Scharf is not being featured that much, even though he's on the Trump legal team?
I don't know.
He's a not so handsome white dude.
Oh, I thought you were going for a punchline there. I didn't know you were going for a. Well, I don't know. I mean, I would say he's being. I mean, you and I have gone back and forth on this. He was on CNN just the other day again. So I mean, he was on with Jake Tapper. It was at the top of my website. We didn't talk about it as a top 3, but he was on both Fox News and CNN, I believe, Tuesday, Brad.
John, here's the other situation.
I know he's not your favorite Hannah Hotbody.
Here's the other situation. I know
that you prefer Hannah. Go ahead.
Have you ever watched The Five on Fox?
No.
Okay. What you'll notice is all the women who sit around the table there, the 5, the women are there, they are all in skirts with high heels and very attractive legs.
Ooh, yeah. Okay, by the way, I'm adding that to my queue of shows to watch. Go ahead.
That's why.
They're wearing pickleball dresses. No. That's my new favorite. Go ahead.
We have to take a break.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?